Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
After 3 years of budget cuts, how are Idaho schools faring? Coming up on Dialogue, we'll look at the results of our second annual school survey, and we'll talk about the future health of public schools in Idaho. Stay tuned and get your calls ready. Dialogue is next. Hello, I'm Joan Cartan-Hansen. Thank you for joining us here on Idaho Public Television, on the World Wide Web, and on public radio stations. In the last 3 budget cycles, state officials have cut about $250 million out of Idaho's public school system. What's been the impact of that kind of a loss? For the second year in a row, a few colleagues and I have conducted a survey of the state's school districts to get an idea of the real impact of those budget cuts. And here's what we found in this year's survey. When lawmakers cut the public schools budget last spring, parents and teachers protested, saying Idaho schools would suffer. But now that students are back in school, what actually happened? Well, according to this year's survey, 75% of school districts reporting said they laid off teachers, 62% laid off other staff, and 39% laid off administrators. Many districts reported that they couldn't lay off any more administrators because there were none who weren't also teaching or driving buses. Even though there were fewer teachers, only 33% of districts reporting said their average 4th grade class increased in size. But if you take out band, choir, and PE classes, which by their nature tend to be large, there were still some pretty crowded classrooms in Idaho. The Marsh Valley District had the biggest reported, with 60 in its 9 through 12 social studies class. The Blackfoot District has 40 in one of its 8th grade algebra classes, and the Kendrick Joint School District had 32 kindergartners in one of its classrooms. A vast majority of school districts tried or will try to pass an override or supplemental levy to make up for the loss of state funds. And parents, too, are paying a bigger share of the costs. Almost half of the districts reported increasing fees or lunch costs. And it's important to remember that this is the second year of our survey. Many districts said they made big cuts and eliminated programs last year so that this year wasn't as bad. Both this year's and last year's surveys are available on the Dialogue website. Go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue to see what your district reported. So in general, what does this mean for Idaho's educational system? Joining me now to discuss that are 4 guests representing a big and a small school district, teacher and school board member, all from different parts of Idaho. In our Pocatello studio is Dallas Klinger, American Falls District School Board member and president of the Idaho School Boards Association. Thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And in our Boise studio is Dr. Linda Clark, superintendent of the Meridian School District, Penny Sear, president of the Idaho Education Association, and Murray Dalglish, superintendent of the Council School District. Sir, thank you for driving on over. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And of course, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, toll free at 1-800-973-9800. So we've looked at that survey, and it was a pretty grim picture. Have districts reached the bottom? Have they cut as much as can be cut? You've got the biggest, you've got one of the smallest, but you're both in that situation of not much left.
We have not employed 100 teachers. We're 100 below what the state says we should have, about 19 administrators below, and we've cut 14 days out of the calendar. 9 of those are school days. So that puts us at the place where cutting any more school days would affect us being able to meet the state minimums. We've cut salaries, we've cut supplemental salaries, we've instituted pay to participate and eliminated midday busing for kindergarten. We're really down at the place where I don't know what we would cut next. It's really about cutting salaries and cutting more days. Those are the only options left to districts.
How about in council?
The council district has been cutting for quite some time. We've been in budget trouble for the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, we've lost 20% of our state funding, which has had a major impact on all of our programs. A number of years ago, we instituted pay to play for sports. We eliminated our art class, vocational ed shop classes, reduced our music classes. So the choices for students is getting less and less all the time. I could go on with a long list. We've laid off teachers. We've eliminated a bus route.
And for a small district, that's
That-
significant.
These are significant cuts in a small district, and I think we are reaching the bottom. We have very little fund balance, and I think that we are probably a year or two ahead of many districts who are going to spend down their fund balances. We've struggled in passing levies. We've tried 3 levies in 4 years. They've all failed. And so the support that we would like to get from our local community, we can't because of the demographics and the economy. And so it's put us in a pretty tough position in council.
How about in American Falls?
We've struggled as well, but not near like some of the other ones. We came into this economic problem with a fairly strong fund balance. We had been careful over the years and made sure that we didn't overspend. But when you have 20% cut since 2008, and when 82% of our total budget comes from salaries and benefits, you know, it all translates to people. And fortunately, we were one of the districts that was able to pass an additional supplemental levy. We have, I think, $1.8 million worth of supplemental in our small district. And in addition to that, just this past spring, we converted savings, when the interest rates went down, we converted savings from a building bond from our high school. We refinanced that, and the savings we were able to roll into a conversion and use that for 2 years as additional supplemental.
You said what it comes down to are the people. Penny, how are teachers taking this?
Teachers' morale is very low. They're concerned about if they'll have a job next year. Class sizes are large, as we saw in the survey, and everybody's working more, and you know, they're all hard workers anyway, and they all want what's best for Idaho students and their achievement, and it's getting harder.
Have we hit the bottom? Can we cut any more without seriously losing accreditation, losing the seriously putting our education in jeopardy?
I think that those things you just said are very real possibilities. I personally believe that we need to change the conversation about funding. We need to be talking about what is an appropriate minimum amount of money. I'm maybe a little bit more sensitive to that than some, since we have the unenviable distinction of having the lowest per pupil revenue in the nation in districts over 25,000 this year. Not a distinction we ever wanted. But I do think it's time to talk about what is the minimum. A state official earlier this week said large districts don't need as much money because they have economy of scale. From my chair, we had a tremendous economy of scale when we were fully funded and had full staffing. We're way past any economy of scale. We're down to the bare bones. If another task comes from the state or the feds, there is absolutely no one to give that task to. Our people are doing 2 and 3 jobs. Our teachers are overburdened with all the things Penny said. We're really at that place where we're in serious jeopardy of accreditation, having reductions in our achievement and other kinds of things.
And as hard as it is for the big district, the small districts that we spoke through the survey, we're really worried. We had one superintendent say that he thought this was just de facto forced consolidation. That the state just wants to get rid of small local school districts.
Well, the nearest school to us is 25 miles to the north or 25 miles to the south, and I don't think anyone in any of those communities want to see their students on the bus for an hour each way. So I don't know how realistic that would be. You know, Linda talked about people doing 2 and 3 jobs. Well, that's really the case, and we've had to reduce our classified staff. And now there's more burdens coming from the state as far as information, record keeping, public record requests, and those type of things. I mean, those things, I don't think the legislature knew that those were really unfunded obligations to the districts, and we don't have the people to do some of those things because we've cut back on our classified staff in the office. And so it makes it very, very difficult for us to keep adding more to people's plate. And the same thing for example, my elementary principal is now a half-time teacher because of necessity. I'm the school principal as well as superintendent, and I teach 2 classes at a necessity. Otherwise, we have to eliminate some other classes. So we've had to adjust to this, but how many more classes or burdens can we give to people and expect to get good results?
Let's get to our first phone caller, Drew in Meridian. Drew. Go ahead, Drew. Let's see if I can, let's try that again. Let's get that and that. There we go. Drew, there you go. Go ahead, Drew. Okay. Let's try that again. Drew, are you there? No, I seem to have lost Drew. Let's try Margie in Pocatello. Margie? Oh, I seem to be having phone problems. I think Drew's question was about the parents' role in the system, and let me ask you a bit about the parents. Parents have had to take on a lot more of the cost, a lot more of the responsibility. What are you finding in your district? There's more pay for play.
We have the pay for play, of course, which is hitting families very hard and causing them to make choices I don't believe they ought to make in an education system that provides a well-rounded experience for students. They have to choose between band and softball, or they have to choose between football and choir because they can't afford the fee for both. Parents have been asked to step up in many other ways. Like Murray, this is not the first year of cuts. We've cut $40 million in 3 years. Last year, we changed all of our bus routes. We eliminated buses that went into the subdivision. If you drive down any major street, you will see parents in the morning doing bus duty at the intersections where the buses are stopping. This year, we eliminated midday busing for kindergarten. So picking the morning students up, delivering the afternoon students to school has now become a parent responsibility, no matter where you live, how far away you live. Our booster groups have stepped up and have really changed the focus of their fundraising away from the extras and geared it to raising funds to fill the gap that is left as we have had to cut supply budgets and instructional material budgets and those sorts of things.
And how about in your district?
Very similar. We've had to ask parents for more PE fees, class fees. Sometimes if we want to go on a field trip, the students have to pitch in. That's very difficult in a district, in a county that has had traditionally one of the highest unemployment rates in the state. And so it's very difficult for us to go and ask those parents for money when we know they're struggling as it is. So it does limit options. It does. We do know that some students do not come out for sports because they can't afford it. But that's becoming the new reality.
And how about in American Falls?
Well, of course, when we talked about our supplemental levy earlier, that's people stepping up in our community to the plate and saying, we are willing to tax ourselves to make this work. And so our local parents are already paying a share of what the cost of our schooling is for our American Falls students. And as some of us may remember, back in 1994, they had big negotiations going on to get to Senate Bill 1560 to equalize it all. And now we're getting away from that because by running supplemental levies, those who can
Right.
provide an education at a higher level than those that cannot pass those supplemental levies.
It does. The Idaho Constitution requires that uniform and thorough education, and is that part of that change in conversation?
I think it's a very big part of that change. What does that mean? And what are the minimums that are required to make that work, regardless of the size of your district? I mean, I understand the issues of the rural schools. I understand why in Senate Bill 1560 those things were put in place to equalize. But now we also know that it's not just a factor of size, it's a factor of many other things. When the state made the decision to take the local property tax away and to assume the full responsibility, I think that conversation should have begun to change at that time. It did not. It has been how can you get by with less? And that has been the trend really almost since the time that passed. Previous decades when we had, or the previous decade when we had the downturn in the economy, the local property tax was our anchor. Of course, at that time we didn't see the rapidly declining values, but still, at least there was a measure of more than one source. We now have cut one leg off of the tax stool here, and we did not replace it with full funding for schools. The additional penny did not fill that gap that was created by the loss of the local property tax revenue.
There was one argument made in one of the survey respondents was that we have, though the legislature did not raise taxes at the state level, they de facto raised taxes at the local level.
That's right.
Is that?
When districts can pass the
If
levies.
they can pass them.
If they can pass the
Yeah,
laws.
if they can pass their levies, because there's many districts around the state that haven't been able to pass levies because their communities can't support more or higher taxes. So
Let's give the phones one more try. So if we can get Margie in Pocatello. Are you there, Margie? No, yeah, obviously our funding for our new phone system is working. Let me try that one more time. Here we go. Let's see if I. No, it does not want to go. I'm sorry, Margie. Your question from my notes says, "Where does the money from the lottery go?" The money from the lottery goes into. It's supposed to be into building. It's
State buildings.
State buildings.
Half of it
and-
goes to schools and half goes to state.
And for the
buildings.
schools, it doesn't go to pay your daily bills. It goes to pay for building.
That's not quite true.
No, okay.
The law that established the distribution of the lottery funds was exactly that. But as we have faced the financial crisis, the state legislature allowed districts to use that money instead of for buildings, to use it to help to balance the general fund budget. One of the big issues that we face, and that's a really good segue into that, is that over the last 3 years we've become really reliant on one-time money. So if you move that 1 year, then what do you do the next year?
Right.
We currently have a budget balanced on $12.4 million of one-time money. So if the state did nothing more next year, we would have a $12.4 million deficit. Because we have had the ability to move our $4 million of our plan into the general fund. We had federal jobs money, and those things are one time, they're gone.
Along with the ERA funds that came from the federal, those also helped us to maintain at least a level of education, maintain some of the teachers that we had, job fund, the ERA funds, but you know, as we project out 4 or 5 years on where we think our budget's going to be, there's a cliff out there. If the one-time money doesn't continue to come, we've got a huge problem, not only in our district but clear across the state.
yeah.
You know, this is a pretty depressing show. Is it really? Is it really? Is it that bad? And if it is that bad, what should we do about it?
Well, Joan, I'd like to address a couple
Yeah.
of things here, and that is, we've seen that we just got notified yesterday that they're going to cut the title monies from the federal government some. That's going to hurt us because we've already budgeted for that money, and I don't know, you know, we've already budgeted that money, but we're not going to get some of that. So I think we need to be worried about what's coming down the road. I think the small districts that rely on forest funds that's also at risk, and that's tens of millions of dollars to Idaho schools. And it looks like the national legislature may do away with that.
That payments in lieu of
The
taxes.
payments in lieu of
Right.
taxes, and so we're very concerned about those safety nets for the small districts. And then you'll really see districts in distress. And I don't think it's going to be very long if we keep at this pace that you see a district declare bankruptcy or just not be able to pay its bills.
There's another issue that we haven't mentioned that's sort of hanging over, I think, the future funding, and that is that the legislation that was enacted by the last legislature escalates the decreases that districts get in staffing money over the next many years and then on into perpetuity. So that was a loss of about $1 million this year for us. Next year, when it escalates to the next level, it's $5 million. And it goes on for 3 years, and then it stabilizes at 5%. That money is being used to fund the pay for performance for teachers and the technology fund. So that is a decrease in the allocation that we get each of those years and escalating. That's got to be factored into the
So
future
instead
budget.
of giving additional money for pay for performance and money for technology, they're taking it out of another pot, essentially.
We're taking
They're
it
taking it out of salary-based apportionment.
and
so
then
they're-
telling teachers they can earn it again.
Right.
Let's pay for performance is a huge issue, and we only have about 10 minutes left, so I want to touch on that a little bit, and perhaps we can touch on it a bit more in the web extra that will follow this program. Pay for performance, what is that going to do to a small district?
Well, my biggest concern with pay for performance is, one, we don't know what the impact's going to be. And I think that what you're going to see in a year or two is you're going to see those districts that have resources, do have supplemental levies, will be able to support their GT programs, their remediation programs and everything else. So they're going to perform better because they have the resources to get there. And so you've kind of institutionalized rewarding those districts which have resources and punishing perhaps those districts that don't. We've always been in the top 10 as a performing district. We're starting to see that level off. We're starting to see that the resources are now starting to, we can't keep that pace up anymore.
Scores can't go up if you
It's-
can't have
it's
someone
very
help the
difficult.
remedial kids. You
It's
can't have the
very,
gifted
very
and talented
difficult.
kids if you don't
We've
have
reduced our
employees,
summer school
yeah.
in the elementary, and we eliminated it in the secondary. Those are things which kept us doing very well. We can't do that anymore.
Right.
How about for teachers? This has got to be a big issue.
Well, it is an issue because teachers are supportive of pay for performance, as is the IEA, but we're in favor of it when it's funded with new money, not when they take money away from the teacher's salary schedule, the base schedule, in order to give a bonus to some. The way it's set up now, only districts that meet the state set goals can get local goals. So even though everybody worked to say what they were going to do in their districts by September 1 for pay for performance, it's all well and good, except they have to meet the state requirements first, and if they don't, they can't get the money at the local level. So that's something that would be nice to change.
In American Falls, as a school board member, you're looking at pay for performance. What do you think?
You know, this year what we've done is we've gone ahead and adopted the state. We haven't gone and written ours. We're in the process of doing that for next year.
So it's coming down the pike.
Just, yeah.
It is, and you know, as far as pay for performance, I think that it's probably a good idea. But like Penny said, I'm not in favor of reducing all salaries in order to bonus some. If we're going to do it, let's bonus on top of what we already are paying.
Because it's not like that. One of the other issues we found when we talked to superintendents around the state was that, especially those that are on borders close to our surrounding states, are losing teachers because that base salary is not high. What are you finding in your teachers?
They're losing the best teachers because they're actually recruiting teachers.
So Wyoming, for
to come
example,
to Wyoming
was sneaking across the border and stealing our good
Yes.
math and science teachers.
Yes, they are.
I actually think that's something we're all going to see. I have a lot of concern about the stress that our teachers are under, the heavy loads that they have. And I think that many of them are simply going to say, I get this much money, because our salaries have never been competitive, and now we've eroded them even more. So I think it will make a decision to change careers or to go somewhere else much easier than it has been in the past.
Well, and we already know that they have. There have been classroom K-12 teachers who have gone to the university level, for instance, or who have just gone overseas, gone abroad to work, or have just changed careers, like Linda said.
Well, the reason why we do the survey is to try and answer that question of, legislature made these cuts, what really happened? That we now have a picture of it, and it's not a very nice picture. We'll run this around the state. What do you worry about going into this next session? What does the future hold? And actually, why don't we start with you, Dallas and American Falls?
You know, that's a good question. We would have liked a little bit of heads up last year before the major legislation came through. It makes me a little gun shy of what's coming this year that we don't know about. But we're ready and willing to take on, you know, whatever we need to. That's one of the things that will create success here in our state, is that we have a lot of people who are come from pioneer stock. The pioneers made it work. We have 500 trustees across the state that have the education of their students as their principal driving force in their services as school board trustees. They do this as a volunteer thing. It's a lot of late nights, a lot of interesting phone calls, but they do it, and they do it with love for the children and love for their communities. And so I think that all in all, I think that we're going to survive it. We're going to come out and thrive because we'll find ways to make it work.
And Linda, what do you worry about?
Well, I have concerns about our ability to sustain the high level of achievement that we have. Our graduation rate, our students earning thousands of college credits, our achievement. This all has to come with some price. We can't leave a wake of bodies behind us as our teachers fall over from the load, honestly. I have a lot of concern about the one-time money that we have. And I think a big concern is just, I mentioned before, the need to change the conversation about not only how we fund education, but the role of education in economic development. We have a lot of folks downtown who talk about economic development as their most important thing, but there's a disconnect with adequately funding public schools, which entices companies to come. So I just am concerned on many levels. I don't see a glimmer out there of hope.
And just if you don't adequately fund schools and you do end up laying off teachers or other classified employees, that you've got a lot of unemployed people out there that don't have any money to stimulate our economy. So it's just not good all around. And I just wanted to say, Dallas said that the trustees love the kids and want the kids to achieve, and I know that we all do. That's our number one goal, is for our students to succeed and go out into the economy and be prosperous, well-rounded adults.
And Dallas, let me give you the last minute.
Well, I worry about the loss of opportunity for our students because we're eliminating, electives and things like that. We're getting down to the basics, and that's not a well-rounded education. I think that we need to have art classes, and we need to have the rural students to have those opportunities, and we're losing those.
Right.
We're losing those right now, and I think that that's pretty nearsighted. And I think at some point we're going to have to say, what is that part of what we want a well-rounded student to have? And we're moving away from that very quickly.
Right. Well, as we get into the legislative session, I'll bring you back if that's okay, and we'll see where we stand. And I'm afraid we have run out of time for our show. I'd like to thank you all there in Pocatello. Dallas, appreciate it. Linda, Penny, appreciate it here, and appreciate you joining us. We have more information on our website. Check it out. Check out those surveys at idahoptv.org. We'll continue our discussion on their Web Extra. Check that out on our website, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll see you next time on Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.